All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsor. Thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan. The month of Sivan. Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all of the shiurim and drushos this month in the Chosef Refuah Shlema for Kathy's sister Donna Baker Matson. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, she will have a complete and enduring refuah. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem, an exciting daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Chof Test 29, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on daf Chof Ches Amud Beis 28b. 28b. Good. Good. Perfect. Good. We're picking up 28b. We're picking up in Meretz Hashem at Mesveh, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, about 19 lines up from the bottom. Just to reorient ourselves a little bit. So the Mishnah introduced us to a very interesting concept, which is as follows. That Rabbi Elazar ben Parta went ahead and said three things. Essentially what he said was as follows. That if you have a situation where halacha l'maisa, again, a city was besieged by an army, a boat was being thrown around the turbulent seas, and someone was going out to be judged for a capital case, you make the assumption that they are still alive. Halacha l'maisa, on the other hand, if a city was overrun by a foreign army, or a boat capsized at sea, or someone was being let out to be executed, we give them the chumras as if they're alive and if they're dead. In other words, we have to treat them both ways, as if they're alive and if they're dead. We give them the halachic status, whatever comes out to the most stringent way. Comes along Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef says, by the way, this halacha that you go ahead and you give the person the chumras of living and dead is only in a Jewish court, in a beis din. But in a Gentile court, halacha l'maisa, once someone has had a death sentence handed down to them, they're going to be executed. In other words, there's no staying of that particular judgment. So the Gemara is now going ahead and challenging that piece. The Gemara is Mesveh. Oh, actually, we did this. Sorry. Tashma. 3 lines down from that. Tashma. So about 16 lines from the bottom. Tashma. Shama mi beizin shel Yisrael. Shaya omrim. Ish ploni meis. Ish ploni nerag. Yasios ishto. If you hear testimony from a Jewish beizin, from a Jewish court, saying the following: Ruvain, right? Ish ploni, so and so, meis, has died, or so and so has been killed. Ultimately, again, based on the testimony of beis din, you allow his wife to remarry. However, but if you hear like from the Gentile executioner, ish ploni meis, ish ploni nerag, so and so has died, so and so has been killed. You cannot allow his wife to remarry based on the testimony of the executioner. Says the Gemara. Well, let's analyze this. My mace or my nerag. What do you mean when you say that you have testimony that a guy died or that a guy was killed? What does that mean? Ilema, mace mamish, v'nerag mamish. If you want to say that literally, it means that Beis Din is testifying that a guy literally died or that a guy literally was killed. I don't understand. I will say, why, if you received that information from a Gentile source, why would you not be permitted to allow the wife to remarry? After all, Hakaimalan, the Komasiach Lefitumo, Hemune Mehemnile. I will say there's a fascinating concept as follows: that you could have a person who may not be believed to give eidos, but if he shares information, what we call Masiach Lefitumo. Masiach Lefitumo means that the person is just giving up the information of their own volition. They're not being prompted. They're not being asked. They're simply being going, oh, Steve, thank you so much. Thank you. It's perfect. Thank you so much. With foam if possible. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. So ultimately, again, there's concept of Masiach Lefitumo, which is a person just offers up information of their own volition. Then halacha l'maisa, they should be believed. So I don't understand if the Gentile executioner tells us Reuven was killed, Reuven died, why wouldn't we believe him? To which the Gemara says, Elalav meis yotze lamos, nerag yotze leharig. Rather, what do you see from here? Mace doesn't mean mace. Rather, what does mace mean? Mace means he's going out to be killed. going out to be executed. Nerag, so nerag yotze lehareg. So we'll say, right, I'm sorry, mace means yotze lamos, he's going out to die. Nerag yotze lehareg. So we'll say, so this is talking about people who have been condemned, but ultimately, again, have not yet been executed. The Katani, the Bezdin Yisrael, Yasiyas Ishto. And I will say, what does it say? What does the Bryce say? That if this is happening in a Jewish court, this is a Jewish court, you could assume that ultimately, again, the guy is dead. And I will say, what does that mean? You see from here that in a Jewish court, halacha l'maisa, once a person has been condemned to death, then what? Ultimately, Beis Din carries through, and Beis Din does not stay the sentence. So this contradicts Rav Yosef, the Olam Meis Mamish V'nerag Mamish. In reality, I will say, no, we're talking about a case where Beis Din is testifying the guy is literally dead or the guy was literally killed. So he said before, why, if that's the case, then why will we not believe this information when it comes from a Gentile source? We just said before, whenever the information is offered of the Gentile's own volition is believed, we will say it's only Masiach Lefi Tumo if the Gentile has no benefit in the information. Of the lachzuki shikrahu. But I will say, if it's a piece of information from which the Gentile benefits, ultimately, again, we are concerned that he died, that he lies. I will say, what's the benefit over here? The Gentile likes to take pride in the fact that in his court system, when they judge someone to death, when they sentence someone to death, they kill him, right? That ultimately, again, there's no revocation of the sentence. So because of that, interestingly enough, even if someone has just been condemned, we are concerned that the Gentile may actually report that he was actually killed, even though he has not been killed yet, because that makes their court system look a little bit stronger and a little bit starker. Okay, Ikeda Amri, we'll say an alternate version of this discussion. Rabbi Yosef, Lo Shana El Beis Din Shel Avdei Kochavim. All of this was only said in a Gentile court, top of Chavtes, we'll say, top of Chavtes. However, Aval Beis Din Shel Yisrael, but in the Beis Din Shel Yisrael, Kivam Dinafak Leidina Lekatla Katlile. So we'll say now again in this version we say, but once in a Beis Din Shel Yisrael, once a person ultimately again has a sentence handed down to them, they're killed. In other words, we'll say, so this version is the opposite of that which we had before, right? So beforehand, Rav Yosef was positing that halacha l'maisa in a Beis Din of Ovdei Kochavim, once they hand down the verdict, that's it. The person is as good as dead. In a Beis Din Shel Yisrael, there's the ability to somehow sometimes appeal the verdict, upend the verdict. Okay, now we're saying this Ikeda Amri. Ikeda Amri is just the opposite. It's just the opposite. When do we say that there's a possibility, halacha l'maisa, that a person could have their sentence appealed? That's only in a Gentile court. But in a Jewish court, once the sentence has been handed down, the guy is as good as dead. So the Gemara says, Amar le Abaye. So we'll say, Chav Tasmav 29a, second line down from the top. Amar le Abaye, Beis Din Shel Yisrael Nami, Afshad de Chazle Zechusa. But that's not true, Abaye says. We'll say, in fact, again, there are so many mechanisms built in to the Jewish court system to allow even for last-minute overturning of capital decisions, right? So you can find this schus, you can find some type of you can find some type of reason to exonerate. To which the Gemara says, "Ki chazul zechusa mikamei de ligmardina." This is interesting. The Gemara posits that when ultimately, again, do we look for a zechus? When do we go ahead and look for some type of way to overturn the sentence? That's only before judgment has been rendered, right? The Gemara din. Baser Gimardina su lo chazule zechusa. But if halacha l'maisa, again, once the verdict has been delivered, they're not going to find the zechus. Now I will say, Rashi points out over here, it doesn't mean that even after the verdict has been delivered, that ultimately, again, they would not overturn the verdict. In other words, we're always willing to overturn the verdict up until the point the guy is executed. What the Gemara is just suggesting is, when it comes to a Jewish court, there's so much drisha v'chakira. What's the good word for drisha v'chakira? Due process? Is that the word, right? There's so much due process that if we get to the point of a verdict to execute someone, the probability of overturning that is almost non-existent. Not because we won't, but because we'll say, in fact, again, not because we won't, but because it would just be so uncommon. Let me say, So Rabbi says, being a surprise that supports this. So Rabbi say, I just want to point out this version is a 180, right? So in this version now, what we're saying is, in a Jewish court, in a Gentile court, even once a guy has had a verdict against him to be executed, halacha l'maisa, he's not considered dead until he's dead. Right? In a Jewish court, once the verdict has been delivered, it's almost as if he has a cheskas misa, right? That he's going to die. What's the logic? So I'll say the logic is that in a Jewish court, if already, again, by the time we've got to the sentence, they haven't found the schus, chances are they're not going to find the schus. I will say, so why is it that by a Gentile court, the verdict can be overturned? Why is that? As they say, it's all about the Benjamins, right? So I'll say, so the Maisa, again, there's the possibility to go ahead and overturn that verdict through some type of monetary compensation. Right? So that's the logic over here. So let me say, that supports this. Komakom, sheyamdu shnayim v'yomru meidim anu es ish ploni shenigmar dina beis. It's the same. It's the same conversation. It's just the opposite. It's just literally the opposite of what we said. So the Bryce said before. So kol makom sheyamdu shnayim v'yomru meidim anu es ish ploni shenigmar dina beis dino shel ploni. Right. Sorry. So we say as follows. Anytime two people come up, stand up. Steve, thank you so much. Thank you. The best. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah, go ahead. So go. You know, it's fine. Everybody's looking nervously. Yeah, it's right. Go. It's fine. It's fine. It's recording. All right. So the rest says as follows. So let's bring a brayso that supports this. Kol makom sheyamdu shnayim v'yomru meidim anu es ish ploni shenigmar dina bebeis shel ploni uploni edav harizeh harig. So we'll say, look at the brayso. The brayso says, anytime two people get up and they testify, right? We know about so-and-so, we know about Ruvain, that halacha l'maisa again, his verdict was sealed in Beis Din, and so-and-so and so-and-so were the witnesses, and they testify that he was sentenced to death in a Beis Din, harizeh harig. Ultimately, again, we executed. Now, so what do you see from that? What are the witnesses testifying about? What are they testifying about? They're testifying that Ruvain, right, was convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to death. Ruvain now ran away. So they're testifying. Ruvain went ahead with sentenced. So we'll say, what do we do based on that testimony? We execute the guy. What do you see from here? You see from here that Allah Kalamaisa, once a decision for execution has been handed down, is, so to speak, irreversible. To which the Gemara says, that's not a good case. I'll tell you, I Dilma Boreach Shiny. But I'll say that might be a different kind of case. You know why? Because if Reuven is running from Beis Din, chances are that's a pretty good indication of guilt, right? In other words, usually innocent people don't run, right? So if he's running away from Beis Din in the midst of a capital crime, chances are he's actually been convicted of that crime. So Tashma, Shama Beis Din Shal Yisrael Shay Omrim Ish Ploni Meis Ish Ploni Nerag. Yes, so again, same rights as we had before. If we hear from a Jewish Beis Din that they say so and so Reuven is dead, right, or Reuven has been killed, Yasiu Ishto. Ultimately, again, we can allow his wife to marry based on this testimony. Mikuman terisim shal ovdei kochavim. If you hear about this from the Gentile executioners, ish ploni meis, ish ploni nerag. Ayasius ishto. Don't allow his wife to remarry. My meis my nerag. We'll say, what does it mean meis? What does it mean nerag? Ilema meis mamish. If you say that meis means literally he died, the nerag mamish, and nerag means he was literally killed. Why wouldn't you allow his wife to remarry based on the testimony of a non-Jew? After all, again, ultimately, again, but we learned, I will say that's what? Any person who conveys information of his own volition is believed. Elalav meis yotse lamos. The Neharag Yotze Liharig. Rather, I will say, what do you see? Mace means what? He's going out to die. Nerag means he's been sentenced to die. Vekatani, bebezin shal yisrael yasiu es ishto. And you see from here that's what? That it says if this information is given to you by a Beis Din, a Jewish Beis Din, you can allow his wife to marry, which tells you what? Once a verdict has been delivered, it's never overturned. So I'll say this confirms what we were saying before. This is the second version. And in this second version, it's in a Beis Din, where if the verdict, the sentencing has taken place, the guy is as good as halachically dead. In a Gentile Beis Din, there's the opportunity to overturn it. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Dikavase gabe ovdi kochavim." A Milo. So we'll say if that's the case, why wouldn't the Gentile be believed? We said before that anytime you offer up information of your own volition, even if you're not normally believed to be a witness, if you offer up this information of your own volition, you are believed. So why wouldn't the Gentile be believed? Hanimili, the I will say it's only called Masiach Lefi Tumo if you have no interest in the information being proffered. However, but if you have interest in the information being shared, in other words, you have a vested interest in the narrative you are conveying, so ultimately again, then sometimes we have to be concerned ultimately again that the person has lied. And therefore I will say in this case, where the Oved Kochavim does have an interest in making his Beis Din look powerful and making his Beis Din looking stark, so therefore we would not believe him. So I will say, so bottom line seems to be that the halacha really sides with this second version. And therefore halacha l'maaseh, interestingly enough, it is in a Jewish court where if a person ultimately, again, has been sentenced to death, this is actually very interesting. Now we're going to revisit this more, but it sounds like from here that if a person is sentenced to death, and you have witnesses that say, we saw Reuven, we were in Beis Din, where Reuven was sentenced to death, and so were his witnesses, that we would allow Reuven's wife to go ahead and remarry based on that testimony. Very interesting, right? Even though what didn't the witnesses see? What didn't they see? They didn't see Reuven executed. They did not see Reuven executed. What they saw was Reuven sentenced to death, that halacha l'maaseh, under those circumstances, we would allow his wife to remarry. Conversely, if they saw him sentenced to death in a Gentile court, but did not actually see him executed, we would not allow her to remarry based on that testimony. Very interesting. Good. We'll say Mishnah. We'll say tremendous yeshkoch to Reb Steve for arranging the coffee this morning. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Everyone say, let's go. Mishnah, great cases. Hamevi get Beretz Yisrael, the Chala. Now, both remember again, we were speaking about before, actually, we haven't spoken about before, we're speaking about now. Hamevi get Beretz Yisrael. Person is bringing a guest. We'll say, here's the case, right? Reuven is divorcing Rachel, right? Reuven appoints Shaliach. We'll just keep his name Shaliach, just to keep it easy, right? So Reuven appoints Shaliach. Now, happens, Baruch Hashem, both Reuven and Rachel are zochet to live in Eretz Yisrael. So what happens? Reuven will say, when you deliver a get in Eretz Yisrael, what don't you have to do? Right? You don't have to, right? You could just go ahead and deliver the get without any type of statement. So we'll say, here's the case. So Reuven is divorcing Rachel and is sending a shaliach to deliver the get. So what happens? V'chala. Now the shaliach gets ill. The shaliach becomes ill and is unable to go ahead and fulfill his shlichus. So what's the halacha? No problem. Just go ahead and send it with someone else. Now, what's the chiddush over here? If you take a look at Rashi, it's actually Rashi all the way on the top of the page, third line down. So Rabbi says shliach could appoint shliach number 2, right? Without even going into Beis Din. So shliach number 1, he's ill, he can't execute his shlichus. He could even go ahead and appoint a shliach number 2 to go ahead and deliver the get. Okay, Vim Amarlo told Lihi many chayfetz ploni. Now watch this. Let's complicate a little bit, because why not? Right? So let's watch this. Now, if Reuven says to shliach, listen, here's the deal. I want you to give the get to Rachel, but I want you to get back her diamond ring. Right, I want that diamond ring back. Right, so give her the get and get back the diamond ring. Right, then ultimately again, lo yishalchenu biyad. Then halacha l'maisa, so shaliach cannot appoint shliach number 2. She'ein ritzono she'e piktono biyad. Why Abosai? Because Reuven is essentially appointing shliach number 1 for a dual-faceted shlichus. Number 1 was to go ahead and deliver something to Rachel, and number two was what? To bring something back to Reuven. That was like, again, so ultimately Reuven lav dafka wants his item in the hands of someone else. In other words, Reuven is dafka going ahead and appointing shliach number one, because that's the guy he wants, that's the guy he trusts to bring back the diamond ring. So in case number one, where all that's happening over here is delivery of a get, if shliach number one becomes sick, he could on his own appoint shliach number two to deliver the get. In case number two, where again it's a multifaceted shlichus, where there's delivery of a get and bringing back of an item of value, so that it's not so pashut that Reuven trusts someone else to bring back the diamond ring. So therefore, again, in that case, shliach number one cannot appoint someone else to execute the shlichus. Fascinating case. Good. We'll say, let's go. We'll say this is really exciting, because really exciting, because halacha l'maisa, now we're getting into the sugyas ultimately again of shlichus, which are fascinating, because remember, this is not just about Gittin, right? We're going to see about say this comes up all of the time. Someone asks you to do something, you can't necessarily go ahead and fulfill the agency. What are your rights as a shaliach to go ahead and appoint someone else to finish the job? So watch this. Rav Kana, Chala Tanan. So also Rav Kana says, by the way, the only time shliach number one, in case number one, I will say, in case number one, the only time shliach number one has the ability to appoint shliach number two is when he becomes ill. Meaning, I will say, what does it mean he becomes ill? What does that mean? What does that mean? He's unable to fulfill the terms of his agency. That's when he can go ahead and appoint shliach number two. So the Gemara says, Pshita, chala katani. That's obvious. That's what it says. That's what it says. Right? We'll say it says ultimately again chala, that he became ill. Mabtin, what would you have thought? Huadin afagav delo chala. I would have thought no. The truth is, agent number one could always appoint agent number two. Right? Shliach number one could always, even if he didn't become ill. V'hai diktani chala. And why does it say that shliach one became sick? So archa demilsa katani. Because sometimes the Gemara just talks. How does the Gemara talk? Like, in normative terms, so we'll say under normal circumstances, when is shliach one appointing shliach two? When is that happening? When is that happening? When shliach one becomes ill, right? But Pashtus will say if shliach one is able to, he's going to go ahead and fulfill the terms of his agency. But Pashtus, the only time he wouldn't is when he becomes ill. When he becomes ill. So Kamashman Rabbi say Kamashman, no. It's the only right that shliach number one has to go ahead and appoint shliach number two is when he is unable to fulfill the terms of his agency. But if he is able to do so, then halacha l'maisa, he must do so. So Rabbi said this is a very important qualification. What the Gemara is suggesting over here is that perhaps the only time a shaliach has the ability to transfer agency is when he is unable to execute the terms of his shlichus. But if he is able to, but let's say he just doesn't feel like it, right? I have something better to do today, right? If he just doesn't feel like it, that would not give him the right to go ahead and halacha l'maisa transfer the terms of the agency. So let's analyze. We're not finished. Hey, Chidami. So we'll say, what's the case? This is so fascinating. Hey, Chidami. Ida amarle holech afagav lo chalanami. Now we'll say, as we're going to see now, there are different ways in which you could appoint an agent. I will say, let's say Reuven just says to shliach, he says holech. I will say, what does holech mean? What does holech mean? Go. Now it doesn't just mean go. It means go and deliver. So I will say that is considered to be a nondescript agency. In other words, you're just saying holech. Do me a favor, just go take this. So essentially, I will say afagav delo chalanami. I will say in that case, even if the shliach didn't become sick, he should be able to go ahead and transfer the agency, right? Appointing the shliach. Why I will say? Because holech essentially is a nondescript appointment. It's like pretty much what Reuven is saying to shliach is, you're my FedEx. Right, you're my FedEx. Right, so if you can't deliver, just get another FedEx. It's nondescript. However, so I would say if that's the case, even if shliach doesn't become ill, he should be able to transfer the agency. The amarle at holech. I will say, what if Reuven says to shliach at holech? I will say, what is at holech? What is at holech? You. I will say one little word, two little letters, and suddenly it changes the entire thing. At holech is Reuven saying, you and only you. I want you, right? At holech, right? So I will say, so afilu chala nami, right? Chala nami, I will say, well, if that's the case, he says at holech, then what? Even if shliach becomes ill, shliach shouldn't be able to what? He shouldn't be able to transfer the agency. To which the Gemara says, afilu chala nami. Vi Rab Shimon Gamliel, and I will say, Rab Shimon Gamliel, afilu chala nami lo. So I'll say furthermore again, and if it's Reb Shimon Gamliel, even if he gets sick, he should be able to transfer the agency. Or does Reb Shimon Gamliel say, this sanya, holich get zeli ishti. We'll say, right, Reuven says to shliach, take this get to my wife. Hareze mishalcho biyad achar. Again, if the shaliach wants to transfer the agency to someone else, he could do so. Because we're supposed to say this is a nondescript appointment of an agent. So therefore, the goal is to get the get to Rachel. So therefore, again, shliach could appoint another shliach. However, at holech getzel ishti. If a Reuven says to the shliach, I want you to take the get to my wife, hareza lo yishalchenu biyad achar. Ultimately, again, at that point, the shaliach cannot appoint someone else to deliver the get. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Benkach u benkach ein shliach oseh shliach." Rabbi Shmuel says that no. That's not the way it works over here. Now, I will say, this is by Gittin. By Gittin. Whether or not Rabbi Shmuel holds this by other cases, we'll discuss. Rabbi Shmuel is saying, if you're appointed to deliver the get, you cannot go ahead and appoint someone else in your stead. Whether he said holech or at holech, no, you have to get the job done. I will say, just understand, Rabbi Shmuel's position is very logical because remember again, what's happening over here, remember, get only works. Get only works if what? If it's directly from husband to wife, right? V'nasan biyada. Husband has to deliver the get to his wife. So again, shlucho shel adam kimoso. A person's shaliach is an extension of himself. So Shmuel says that works as long as the husband appoints that shaliach. So therefore, again, shaliach can't start appointing other shluchim. That doesn't work because what that will do is it'll break the chain of v'nasan biyada. So Shmuel is of the opinion that whether you said heilach, right, holech, or at holech, it doesn't make a difference. The shaliach that is appointed is the shaliach that has to deliver. And shaliach can never make other shluchim. So I will say, so now watch this. So therefore, again, the Gemara is just asking, what's the case of Mishnah? Because we'll say, here's the problem. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, a husband gives a get to a shaliach. Shaliach's bringing it in Eretz Yisrael. What's the halacha? If he becomes sick, if he becomes ill, he could appoint the shaliach in his stead. So what's the case? So the Gemara says as follows. Holech v'hu dechala. So we'll say one possibility is the case of the Mishnah is a case of holech, nondescript. Take it, and therefore the shliach became ill. In that case, the Mishnah says he can appoint another shliach in his stead. The other possibility is at holech v'chala shayni, or maybe it's still a case of at holech. But even in a case of at holech, you take it. Maybe the Tanakama of the Mishnah holds that in a case of choli, in a case of sickness, shaliach could still go ahead and appoint another shliach. Another possibility is Rabbi Shmuel Silber, and even Rabbi Shmuel Silber holds that when the shliach becomes sick, when the shliach becomes ill, he is allowed to appoint another shaliach. Okay, so we'll say three possibilities as to how to read the Mishnah. So Tanan, Hamevi get Eretz Yisrael v'chala. We learned in the Mishnah, right? Shliach is bringing a get in Eretz Yisrael and he becomes ill. Hareze mishalcho biyad achar. He could appoint another shliach in his stead to deliver the get. Or minhu raise a kasha. Amr l'shnayim. Tenu get lishti. We'll say, now watch this case. We'll contrast this with another case. We'll say Reuven goes over to two guys, and he says to them, guys, Tenu get leishti, give a get to my wife. Or l'shlosha, he goes over to a group of three, and he says, kisvu utenu get leishti, go ahead and write and give a get to my wife. Hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu. The boss says focus on the second case. Right? Reuven goes over to three guys, says, guys, write and deliver a get for my wife. So we'll say, what does the Brisa say? Those three must be the ones who write and give it. Hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu. Inhu in. So what do you see from here? Those three guys must be the ones who deliver it, and they cannot appoint someone else to do it. So we'll say, what do you see from this brisa? That when the husband appoints a shaliach for delivery of the get, what is the halacha? That shaliach must be the one who executes the agency, and he has no ability to appoint anyone else. It contradicts our Mishnah. Rabbi, no, listen to this. Hasam taimamai mishum bizayon debal. We'll say it's different. I'll tell you something interesting, which I don't know that we would necessarily glean ourselves from the Gemara. If you look at Rashi's bizayon debal. The Rashi is actually right across from the previous Mishnah we started. Rashi says sha'alav lichtov es haget ve'im rotze sheidu babrab m'sheni odeh lichtov. We'll say it's interesting. Apparently, in the original formulation of the halacha, who was writing a get? The husband. The husband himself would write the get for his wife. So what's interesting is, it's a shtickle embarrassment for the husband not to be able to write the get. Why? Because it shows a certain lack of Judaic literacy. So therefore I will say, watch this. When a man is saying to a group, Kisvu utinu get leishti, write this get and deliver it to my wife, it's embarrassing for him that he can't write the get himself. So he doesn't want word getting out that he can't write the get. So he's speaking to this group of three. He's saying, you guys take care of it. He doesn't want the process delegated to anyone else because he doesn't want anyone else knowing that he can't write the get. Contrast that with our Mishnah. We'll say, what's the case of our Mishnah? What's the case of our Mishnah? What's happening in the Mishnah? What is the husband saying to the Shaliach? Right? Holech, take the get. We'll say, so there's no bizayin the Baal. Right? In other words, that halacha l'maisa, the get's already written, it's already done. Here, it's just a question of delivery. When it comes to delivery, there's no embarrassment for the husband if he doesn't deliver it himself. Therefore, perhaps, in that case, the agency is transferable. Rava says there's a different reason. Mishum demili ninhu umili lo mimsor l'shliach. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. So we'll say, remember, Gemara was posing a contradiction between our Mishnah and the Brisa. Our Mishnah makes it sound like agency is transferable. The Brisa said that if Reuven goes over to three guys and he says, guys, write and deliver my get, that agency is not transferable. So I will say, so answer number one, it's not a contradiction. Answer number one is the case of writing and delivering is different because there's an element of embarrassment to the husband. When there's embarrassment, we want it to stay in that group, not any larger, and therefore it's not transferable. In the Mishnah, there's no embarrassment to the husband because it's just a matter of transportation. Second possibility, Rava Amar, Mishum Demili Ninhu. We'll say this is fascinating. I will say, in a situation of shlichos, in order to transfer shlichos, you have to be able to, the Gemara is suggesting, you have to be able to transfer something tangible and not simply a verbal directive. I will say, ultimately, again, in the case where Reuven goes over to three guys and he says, Kisvu utinu get leishti, write, and deliver the get to my wife, they can't transfer that agency to someone else. Why not? Because the act of writing, I will say, is just a verbal commandment. There's a verbal command. There's nothing tangible to be handed over. It's mili, and you can't transfer mili to another shaliach. Conversely, I will say in our Mishnah, when Reuven, what is Reuven given to the shaliach? What does Reuven give to the shaliach? What is he giving him? A get, right? And therefore, again, if the shaliach wants to appoint another shaliach, what will he give him? A get. So there's something tangible. So maybe the Gemara is suggesting that when it comes to transfer of agency, maybe it can be done when there's something tangible to transfer, but not when it's just a verbal command. What's practical difference in these two opinions? Ultimately, we'll say the practical difference would be a shaliach who's giving over a matana. He's giving over a matana. If you look at Rashi says shliach matana, shamar balabayis lebeis edin kisvu shtar matana leploni. Ultimately, we'll say, where Allah Reuven says to two edim, write a document of a gift to Ploni. So ultimately, again, if it's about bizayon debal, that doesn't apply over here. But if it's about mili mimsaran, it does apply over here. We'll put the Rabbi Shmuel, Rav Amar Matana in a get. Rav says Matana is not like a get. Ushmuel Amar Matana hari get. And Shmuel says no, Matana is like a get. Okay, fine. So we'll say, therefore, again, we'll see the halacha l'maisa in just a few moments. But here's what we have. So we'll say, so case number one so far is Reuven says to Shaliach, ultimately again, holech get leishti, right? Go ahead, take the get to my wife, or right, and Shaliach becomes ill. Mishnah teaches me Shaliach could transfer agency to someone else. Now, what we're unsure of in the Gemara is what's the formulation? What is it? Is that a case of just holech? Is that a case of at holech? Is it Reb Shimon Gamliel? So that's still up in the air. Okay. Case number two in the Mishnah will say was what? Where husband Reuven says to Shaliach, take the get and what? It's part two. What's part two? Bring back the diamond ring. So we'll say in that case, what does the Mishnah say? Agency is not transferable. So let's analyze. It says the Gemara. Amar Reish Lakish, we'll say second of the wide lines on the bottom. 6 lines up from the bottom of the page. Amar Reish Lakish, Kan Shana Rebbe, here's what Rebbe said, Ein hashol rashay lahashil, ve'en hasocha rashay lahaskir. We'll say in general, what we see from here is something very interesting. If you borrow something from someone, you don't have the right to lend that out to someone else. Well, so it's very important halacha, right? If you borrow something from someone, you don't have the right to lend that to someone else. if you rent something from someone, you don't have the right to rent that to someone else, right? So no subletting, right? No subletting, no subleasing. I would say it's a very important halacha, because even though, again, you might think that as a borrower, right, you have complete rights. You do. You have complete rights to use it for yourself, but no rights to give it to someone else. So we'll say, now again, what's the logic over here? The logic over here is that, well, why is he bringing this up? Because since Reuven appointed the shaliach to bring back the item, obviously what he's saying is, shaliach, I trust you with the item. But lav dafka, I trust anyone else with the item, therefore the shlichus is going to be non-transferable. Similarly, if I lend something to someone, I trust that borrower with the item. Lav dafka, I trust anyone else with that item. Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Zu afilu tinoko shabes rabban yodin. Rabbi Yochanan says, come on, everyone knows that. That's like the height of like base medrash shtach, right? Like, come on, even babies know that, right? Everyone knows that. So the Gemara says, Ela zimnin digita nami lo havi dinasek. So I'm sorry. Ella, so we'll say rather, what is he saying? Rather, is he saying, Ella zimnin digita nami lo havi dinasek kimisha omer lo al tigersha ella bebayis vigirsha ba'ali. Now listen to this. You're right. In other words, here's what's interesting. The Mishnah is not coming to tell me that the shlichus is not transferable. Why? That's obvious, right? Why is that obvious? Because since Reuven is telling the shliach that he wants him to bring back a pikadon, right, an item of value, so obviously Reuven is saying, I only trust you to do it and no one else. Therefore, it's not transferable. No different than if I lend an item to someone, the borrower cannot transfer it to someone else. Then I will say, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that sometimes if the agent transfers the agency or shifts the agency, sometimes even the get itself won't be good. Why not? I will say, why not? Because I will say, listen to this. Because this could be comparable to the following case. Let's say Reuven says to the shaliach, right? Shaliach, deliver the get to my wife Rachel, but al tigar sh'ala b'bayis. I only want you to divorce her in the dining room. We got engaged in the dining room, right? Life is a full circle, right? I'm a man of my word. I said, right, this was started in the dining room, end in the dining room, right? I want you to go ahead and divorce her, only give her the get in the dining room. V'girsha ba'aliyah. He divorces her on the second story. He gives her the get in the second story. Or, al tigar sh'ala b'yamin, v'girsha b'smol. When you give her the get, I want you to hand her the get with your right hand. You need to go with your right hand. And the shaliach goes ahead and gives her the get with the left hand. These would be cases where if the shaliach differs from the instructions, then halacha l'maisa, the get is not good. Now watch this. So therefore the Gemara is suggesting over here that when the Mishnah said over here, when the Mishnah says Reuven's sending the get with shaliach, and he says to shaliach that what? V'imar tol li himena chayfetz ploni. He says to shaliach, Reuven says to shaliach, take back from her a certain object. Let's just go with the diamond ring, right? Take back from her the diamond ring. Now, we'll say, what's happening over here, what's unfolding over the Mishnah, is a very specific set of instructions. Watch this. For example, the Gemara says, D'chuli alma, heicha, denafka la'apei, v'yave lechefetz, v'hader shak lamine gita, kuli alma lo pligi de gita. So we'll say, for example, when shaliach shows up, and Rachel runs out, and what does she do? Rachel goes ahead and gives the shaliach the diamond ring, and then shaliach gives her the get. Everyone agrees that in that case, divorce effective, right? Gita ma'al yahavi, keep ligi. And we'll say, watch this. Where does the complicated case come up? Hecha da amrle, and we'll say Amadeus, where Reuven said to the shaliach the following set of instructions. Shakol mina chayfetz, right? Here's what Reuven said to shaliach. Reuven says, shaliach, take back the diamond ring, v'hadar havla gita, and then give her the get. So Rabbi says, so now in this case over here, what's happening? There's a very specific set of instructions. Reuven is saying, I'll give you the get, but give me back the ring. Right? Reuven is concerned he's not going to get the ring back. So what does he do? He's leveraging the get. Right? He says, go ahead and give me the ring, and I'll give you the get. V'hadar havla gita. Va'azal ihu, so I'll say, va'azal ihu, now the shliach, what does the shliach do? Va'azal ihu, v'yoyev legita, v'hadar shaka min ha'chayfetz. So what does the shliach do? The shliach first gives her the get, but he gets back the ring. In other words, So he got back the ring, but what did he do? Reverse the order. So let's say, so now what's the halacha in this case? Because technically speaking, what's happened over here? The shaliach, so it's a fascinating case where the shaliach has accomplished the mission, i.e., he's coming back with the ring after having delivered the get, but he reversed the order, which means that he deviated from the instructions of Ruvain. So I say, now the shaila is, so mission accomplished, but you didn't do it the right way. So I'll say, so what's the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan posel, bo, v'chosh came shlucho. Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Rabbi says, shluchos only works if you follow instructions. See, even though, again, it's interesting because you're getting what you wanted at the end of the day, right? You wanted to give the get and you wanted the diamond ring back. You're getting it, but Rabbi Yochanan says, but you didn't follow the instructions. I mean, you don't follow the instructions, even if you get the result, that's not the intended result. So Rabbi Yochanan says, again, whether you did this yourself or you appointed another agent in your stead, it's not going to work. Reish Lakish says, no, it works. It works. Why does it work? Because halacha l'maisa, mission accomplished. So I will say, so fascinating machlokes. So I will say, so just to share this with you, how do we pass? I will say just very quickly, because we're out of time. I will say, listen to this. Rambam writes, Hilchos Gerushin Perek Tes Halacha Hey, Ha'omer Lishlucho. Man says, right, Reuben says to Shliach, Holech get zeli ishti, take the get. Bein sha'amrlo holech, bein sha'amrlo at holech, v'chala o ne'enas, v'shalcho biyad acher. So I will say, so halacha l'maisa, the way we paskin is whether Reuven said holech or at holech. If shaliach encounters extenuating circumstances and is unable to fulfill his agency, he has the right to appoint another shaliach. That's how the Rambam passes. I always say, but again, in order to appoint another shliach, what do you need? Extenuating circumstance. In other words, you can't just do it because you don't feel like it, right? You got to take us to the game. It's like, hey, let me just appoint another shliach. No, if there are extenuating circumstances, you can appoint another shliach. Whatever the formulation was, holik or at holik. Watch this. Vim amarlo toli mimenu chayfetz ploni the same laget. So I'll say, now watch this. However, the exception to this rule is, if Reuben says to shliach, listen, give the get, but I want you to bring back the diamond ring, that is a non-transferable agency. That you cannot transfer. I will say, why not? Because then, again, that's a pikadon situation. Because now you're bringing back something. That's not transferable. So we'll leave that case on the side. I'll say, but halacha l'maisa again, halacha l'maisa is very interesting. So if again he just goes ahead and says, take the get, that agency is transferable as if there's an ones, an extenuating circumstance which prevents the original shliach from executing the shlichus. If however he said, halacha l'maisa, take the get, but you bring me back the object, that agency is not transferable. Good. Mishnah will say there are more cases with that, but for now that's gonna hold us over. Another Mishnah will say, so I'll say, oh, here's where it gets interesting. So I'll say, so now Reuven is divorcing Rachel. Now what happens? He brings her right now. We'll say this is happening in Medinas Hayam. This is happening overseas. So now we'll say, so now remember again, if it's overseas, then what has to happen? The chala, now shaliach is unable to fulfill the agency. So what does he do? Ose shliach bebeis din u'mishalcho. So I will say, now this is a bit more complicated. Whereas in the previous Mishnah, because they get what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, shaliach could just go ahead and appoint another shaliach on his own. In this case, because the get is coming from chutz la'aretz, and you have befanei nechtav or befanei nechtam, so the appointment of a second agent has to take place in Beis Din itself. And in Beis Din, the first shaliach said, befanei nechtav or befanei nechtam. I will say after that, then Beis Din effectively appoints another shaliach to finish giving the get. The second shliach, of course, doesn't say b'fai rather, because why doesn't he say it? Because he wasn't there. Ela omer shliach Beis Din ani. Rather, I will say, what's his line? Especially when he says shliach Beis Din ani. Right? I will say that's his line. He shows up and he says, I am the shliach of Beis Din to deliver this get. Incredible. Amli Rabban Rabbi Abo, shliach the shliach mashi shliach olo. Oh, we'll say, now watch this. So we'll say, now to follow up a little bit, can the shliach of the shliach appoint the shliach? So we'll say, let's play this out, right? So Reuven appoints shliach number one to deliver the get from chutz la'aretz. Shliach number one gets to Eretz Yisrael. He can't go ahead and go on anymore. He gets sick. He comes to the Beis Din, he says, I'm good. So Shliach number 2 now goes as appointed by Beis Din. Right? He says Shliach Beizani. Shliach number 2 becomes ill. Could Shliach number 2 now appoint Shliach number 3? Right? Amaluhu, haloti bailuhu. That's not even a question. Mediktani, ein hashliach acharon. Well, see, if you look at the lashon of the Mishnah says the last shaliach doesn't say b'faynechtam. Rather, he just says shliach beis din ani. I will say the fact that it says shliach acharon and it doesn't say shliach sheni, right? It tells us that what michlal demashri shliach. So I will say what we can infer from the Mishnah that halacha l'maisa very interesting is that shliach number 2 can appoint shliach number 3, who can appoint shliach number 4. Again, I will say we'll see where those secondary appointments actually have to take place. They're taking place in Beis Din, outside. We'll talk about that. Elokiti bailuchu kimashvi shliach bebeis din afilu shlo bebeis din. Here it is. I will say. Rather, what's the shaila? The shaila is when shliach number 2 appoints shliach number 3. Does that have to take place in Beis Din, or can that take place even outside of Beis Din? Amrlei. So not ha loti hamra mi bailan. We will say that's also not a kasha. Why? Because we will say, what does the shaliach have to say when he delivers the get in these situations? Ela omer shliach beis din ani. Right? We will say, remember again, he had the line, because he can't say b'faynechtam, the line he does say is shaliach beis din ani. So we'll say now, obviously, in order to make the statement of shliach beis din ani, what has to happen? What has to happen? You have to be appointed in shliach itself. So we'll say, so what we begin to see is as follows. Number 1, shliach number 2 can appoint shliach number 3, and apparently a whole line of shluchim, as long as what? Everyone who is appointed, ultimately again, is appointed in Beis Din itself. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni Hachi, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak stated as follows, Amrlei Rabbana la'avimi. Shliach the shliach. When the shliach of the shliach kimashvi shaliach, when he appoints another shaliach, bebeis din or shelo bebeis din. Does he have to appoint it in Beis Din, or can it even be done outside of Beis Din? Amrluhu v'tibayluchu. Before he asks that, well, it's just another version. Before he asks that question about whether or not shliach number 3 and 4 have to be appointed in Beis Din, ask a more fundamental question. Right? Imashvi shliach ba'alma. Can shliach number 2 appoint shliach number 3 at all? Amrullah said to him, no. Ha lo kami bailan. That's not a question. Why? Disnan ein hashliach acharon. Because the Mishnah said the last shaliach has to say shliach beizani michlal the shliach mashvilei mashvi shliach indicates thus that the shliach has the ability to appoint another shliach. Elaki kami bailan. So we'll say, what's our shaila? Bebeis din shelo bebeis din. Ultimately, when 2 appoints 3 and 3 appoints 4, does it have to be in Beis Din or not? Amrlahu hanami loti bailuchu. That's also not a shaila. Diktani ela omer shliach Beis Din ani. Ultimately, again, he says that I'm a shliach beis din. Therefore, I will say, what comes out are 2 important nekudos. Number 1, that shliach number 2 can appoint shliach number 3, but any subsequent appointment of shluchim must be done under the purview of Beis Din, i.e. in Beis Din itself. Fascinating. Amar Rabba, shliach be'eretz Yisrael osakama shluchin. Ultimately, a shliach in Eretz Yisrael can make a number of different agents. I will say what that means is the agency is transferable on an ongoing basis. Amar Ravashi, in Meis Rishon, Bitla Kulan. Ravashi says, however, if the first shliach dies, all of the subsequent shluchim are void. Amar Ravashi, come on, that's not true. Had the Abba de Katnusahi. When my father said that statement, he was a kid. Right? He was a kid. In other words, that's we'll say, you know how it is. You know how it is when you're young. You make all kinds of reckless halachic statements. You remember from your youth, right? They'll say, so hey, halavai, right? Halavai, that was youth, right? So say, rather the Gemara says, Ilu meis bal midim shasha isbei. Kusha will say the only person who matters if he dies is the husband, right? Kulu mikoach man kasu, mikoach tebal kasu. We'll say it doesn't really matter if shliach number 1 dies. What matters is, did the husband die? Doesn't die, because remember, shluchim are an extension of who? Of the husband. Therefore, again, isei lebal, isei lekulhu. It will say if husband is alive, then the chain of shluchim is fully intact. Less say lebal, less no lekulhu. If the husband dies, I will say, then the chain is broken. So it's very important. Even though shliach number 1 appointed 2, and 2 appointed 3, and 3 appointed 4, let's say, if shliach number 1 dies, it doesn't make any difference. It does not in any way upend the process. Only the death of the husband upends the process. Why? Because all the shluchim ultimately again are considered an extension ultimately again of of the Baal. I will say, so we'll start with, I just want to just share with you. First of all, I appreciate everyone being so accommodating with the changes. I'll say, it's interesting. When it was fascinating to see, like, when people come into the space, obviously I will say, when you come into a new situation, it's hard to figure out, like, where am I sitting, where am I going, like, what am I doing? So I will say, but yet something very interesting happens, which is after a couple of moments of discomfort, right, and kind of disorientation, you figure it out. We'll say it's an incredible metaphor for life. A lot of times in life, we are cast into new circumstances and new situations. And the first reaction often is, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how I'm going to handle this. And then something amazing happens. Within a couple of moments, or so sometimes in life, it's more than a couple of moments. Sometimes it's a couple of hours, sometimes a couple of days, maybe sometimes a couple of years. The dust settles, and you find your way through. So we should glean koach and Mirtz Hashem from being able to navigate the new small circumstances in the base medrash. And Mirtz Hashem should give us the koach ultimately when we experience this orientation in life to recognize we'll get through it as well. All right, we'll say shkoyach. We'll stop over here. And it's nice to be back in the old base medrash. Yo, there's nowhere else to document. You can't document there. Yeah, I'm not gonna.